It is Friday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day, the final show of the week. Hope everyone is having a good day, has had a good week to this point. It's Friday. Get excited. It is going to be a great weekend and a great show. Lots to get to today. Marcus Fuller is my guest. We will talk Gopher men's basketball. What's at stake the rest of the year? Kind of bleak for the NCAA tournament right now, especially after that loss to Indiana on Wednesday night. But Marcus Fuller will kind of lay out what the Gophers still have to play for, what they're building towards for next year, what they can still accomplish with this last regular season game at Northwestern this weekend, and the Big Ten men's basketball tournament here at Target Center next week. Got some hockey at the end of the show, an amazing stunner in the boys Class AA quarterfinals on Thursday night, as always happens. There's always one of those games. Actually, there's two on Thursday, but there's always at least one of those quarterfinals that dazzles and amazes. So I'll get to that in a little bit. The Wild got a win and made a trade on Thursday. We've got to talk about that. First, though, what did I miss? I want to talk about star power at the beginning of today's show. Anthony Edwards and Caitlin Clark. We'll start with Anthony Edwards because he had the kind of game that makes you realize just what a transcendent player he is becoming. On a night for the Wolves, when they learn that Karl-Anthony Towns is out, and then we learn right after the game is over that he is indeed has a pretty serious injury, a meniscus tear. Going to require surgery. He'll be out at least 4 weeks. They'll reevaluate him after 4 weeks. You look at the calendar, you're like, tick, 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 tick. Playoffs start a little over 5 weeks from now. His diagnosis, his prognosis will have a lot of bearing on where the Wolves go, where they can get to the rest of the season and beyond. He was an all-star, arguably their second most important player, at least their second most important scorer. Some nights their most important player, things like that. Like it's a night where things could have been deflating for the franchise because you learn that one of your cornerstones has a injury that's going to keep him out for quite some time. Not season ending, at least not yet, but a serious injury that's going to keep him out for quite some time. Ant goes out and gets 44 points at Indiana, scores a ton of clutch buckets down the stretch, breaks a tie with a three, gets them to a point where they are, right on the verge of locking it up. But then a couple things happen. They miss a shot. Indiana's got the ball down 2 in the closing seconds. They're sprinting down the court to try to score a layup right at the buzzer. Anthony Edwards comes flying out of nowhere, blocks the shot, game over, hits his head on the rim. Hits his head on the rim in the process of blocking a shot. I cannot fathom this, right? Like you and I, whoever you are listening right now, unless you're Anthony Edwards or someone else who is gifted at basketball in that way, you cannot imagine the idea of hitting your head on the rim. That's 10 feet up there. That's 10 feet in the air. Anthony Edwards is like 6.5 feet tall. That's another 3.5 feet for him to hit his head on the rim. Jumping that high, being that athletic, having the presence to make that kind of play. This isn't the moment where I realized Anthony Edwards is special. We've had a lot of those moments with him already, but this is one of those moments that reinforces just what a gifted player, what a gifted athlete, what a star he is. It almost leaves you at a loss for words. Let's let Wolves coach Chris Finch try to explain what he saw from Anthony Edwards on Thursday night in their 113-111 win over Indiana.
Everything was really decisive. I thought he played really quick. He went downhill in straight lines. He got to his spots. If they were between him and the basket, he'd pull up or make the right play, and then a lot of times he just kept coming down with force. So he had an opportunity to get to the rim. And of course, I thought his defense was outstanding all night. Just incredible block at the end there just to seal it. And then just some huge shots, in the fourth. I mean, just from the three to the and one to the baseline reverse to the little runner. I mean, he had it all going on.
Now, he's not going to be able to do that every night, right? He's not going to have 44 points and a game-clinching block shot every night. So the Wolves will, at some point, need even bigger contributions from their supporting cast. We'll need more from Naz Reid. We'll need more from Jaden McDaniels. We'll need more from Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley Jr., guys like that. They're key players. Kyle Anderson, guys who will have to step up. Will not always be Anthony Edwards, but Anthony Edwards will be willing and able to carry that load because of the transcendent kind of player he was. He showed that once again on Thursday night. Now, Caitlin Clark is back. We are lucky. We are so privileged here in Minneapolis. Caitlin Clark was here last year for the Big Ten women's basketball tournament. She was just here a week ago, setting a record against the Gophers in a blowout win. Since then, she's broken the all-time NCAA men's or women's basketball scoring record, breaking Pete Maravich's record. Now she comes back again. Big Ten women's basketball tournament's been going on for a couple days already. Gophers won Wednesday, lost Thursday. Their season, at least their regular season, the pre-post season is over. Might get a WNIT bid, something like that. But they lose to Michigan. Their season's over in terms of that regard. Giving way now to Caitlin Clark. The Caitlin Clark Show returns 5:30 tonight, and tell you what, I have not yet seen her play in person, but that is going to change tonight. I am going to this game, bringing my family to this game. It is not an accident that we are going to see this quarterfinal session tonight. I want to see this for my own eyes. I know how good she is, but I've been struggling to kind of try to explain either to myself or to other people what the phenomenon of Caitlin Clark is. And I think that struggle goes to two things. One, I just haven't seen her play yet. I have not seen her play live. When you haven't seen it with your own eyes, you have a harder time explaining it. You don't know exactly what it is until you see it. So we're gonna fix that tonight. The other thing is, I think sometimes when we try to explain how great someone is, or try to figure out why there is a phenomenon happening where she's selling out all these games, she's transcending the sport, things like that, we struggle. We try to come up with complicated reasons. We try to come up with, reasons within society, things like that. And I think there is a shift going on. I think, we're at a time when women's sports are far more mainstream, when men and women are watching women's sports, when men and women are marveling at the things these athletes do. I think, though, if we can simplify things just a little bit, if we can bring it back to the most basic explanation, it is this: we naturally gravitate towards special performances, special players, special people. Caitlin Clark is special. She is the best. She is the best women's college basketball player on the planet right now. She is one of the best women's basketball players, period, on the planet right now. We are naturally drawn to people who exceed some sort of norms, exceed some sort of expectation, who are the best of the best. We've seen this countless times in history. LeBron, the home run records in baseball that we're chasing. We want to anoint Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, those who transcend, those who get it done no matter what, those who have that star power, like Anthony Edwards. Like I said, he is on his way to becoming that. He's on his way to being that player in a league full of those players. But Caitlin Clark shines above them all in women's basketball right now. She is that player. She is the one. And that's why everybody wants to see her. It's not rocket science. It's not that hard. It's not so difficult to understand it. She is just simply the best, so people want to see her. So that building will be full. Target Center will be full on Friday night. Iowa, the first of the two games in that session, should be a wonderful environment, should be just another in a game of how good Caitlin Clark is, another opportunity for her to showcase that, and I am really looking forward to seeing it with my own eyes. I am very excited to share this experience with my family. I have two daughters. I have a son. My wife will be there with us. We'll all be there watching this game. We're all going to see this with our own eyes at the same time together. Witness this greatness. My kids are not huge sports fans. I've taken them to various things over the years, especially my older daughter, who's had more opportunity to go to games. We've been to Wolves games, Lynx games, Gophers games, things like that over the years. My younger daughter, who's 7, she's seen some of that, but a lot of her kind of formative years were, kind of cluttered up by COVID. Things weren't happening. A lot of in-person stuff wasn't happening for a while. And then my son is 4. He just hasn't gone to a lot of sporting events because A, it's hard to bring a little kid to a lot of sporting events, and B, COVID was a lot of his early experience as well. So he's been to a Twins game. I want to say a couple other things, but just not a lot. So this will be a big deal. This will be their chance to see an atmosphere, a chance to see something great, a bear witness to greatness. I want them to see that. I want to see it for myself. Very excited to check this out tonight. Hope everybody who wants to can get a chance to see it too, or has seen it already can see it again. And it's just the power of the Stars, right? We want to see the power of the Stars, and they are on full display right now.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
Happy to be joined by Marcus Fuller today. Talk a little Gopher men's basketball. We've already talked plenty of women's basketball, both the Gophers and the Big Ten tournament. Marcus, how you doing?
Not bad. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I was hoping, when we talked earlier in the week, I was hoping this would be kind of are the Gophers on the verge of, putting themselves in a really good spot for the NCAA tournament, and then they didn't play their best game against Indiana. How do we dissect that loss, that home loss to the Hoosiers earlier this week?
Well, there's a lot to dissect there. I was going to say digest, but yeah, you don't want to digest that one.
Spit it right back out.
Yeah, exactly. But no, again, appreciate having me on as always, talking Gopher hoops. Yeah, under better circumstances, I want to say even if they won that game, Mike, I don't think we'd be talking about the NCAA tournament realistically. It was a little different a month ago. They had a lot of quad one win opportunities in front of them. Really, there's not many left. There's only one in the regular season. Obviously, last regular season game is on Saturday at Northwestern. But they're sitting at 1-7 in quad one games. And it's just if you look at the bubble this year, there are going to be a lot of teams that are left out of the NCAA tournament with 5 wins, maybe even 6. It's just how it's going to be. There's a lot of coaches out there, including Ben Johnson. We asked him the other day about would he expand the NCAA tournament, and he was in favor of that. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, or if at all. Why mess with a good product? But this year is going to be a lot of teams, especially high major, I believe, that are going to be left out with a lot more on their resume than the Gophers have.
So how do we, the game itself, is Indiana just a bad matchup? Were they just flat or kind of feeling the wear and tear of the season?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Bad matchup. Bad matchup. It's been a bad matchup for the last 5 years.
Okay.
I mean, they've lost 8 in a row to Indiana. Of course, in years past, Indiana was a better team. I want to say a better team. Yeah, better team. But not, I mean, this team is talented now. There's a lot more expected out of the Hoosiers this year than what they accomplished so far. And, if you look at their roster, you could argue that, they have more talent than the Gophers. If you're just talking about recruiting rankings, NBA caliber player and Khalil Ware. I mean, he was a McDonald's All-American 7-footer. Dawson Garcia was as well. But if you watch that game, I mean, he looked like he belonged in the league. If you switch uniforms and just put a Wolves uniform on him, he would look like he belonged out there. I mean, he had 26 points, 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, and he only, he played just over 30 minutes, was in foul trouble for a little bit. I mean, if he played the entire game, like some of the Gophers players did, close to 40 minutes, he might have had 40 points. So, and there's a lot of NBA scouts in attendance. I'm sure they like what they saw. Mackenzie Mbako, he was a 5-star recruit, number 1 rated recruit in the Big Ten coming into this year. And he's had a kind of a disappointing year compared to what I think people thought. Maybe he might be a lottery pick, but he shined in the second half, hit a few threes and kind of helped the Hoosiers pull away. They just did not handle the interior very well. And the turnovers. I mean, this is a team that earlier in the year, they were turning over at a high rate, worse than the Big Ten. If that continued, this would have been a pretty bad season, I think, for the Gophers. And they cleaned that up. Elijah Hawkins started really, really valuing the ball. Obviously, the nation's assist leader for a while. But the entire team, it wasn't just Hawkins. Not only did they shoot the ball poorly, but they started turnover at a high rate, could not defend the paint, and that was the recipe for a bad loss in their last home game at the Barn.
So they've got this game at Northwestern this weekend, and they've got the Big Ten tournament here at Target Center. Like, short of a miraculous run, say winning Saturday at Northwestern, and then going on a run, 2 or 3 game run in the Big Ten tournament. Like, what do you want to see, or what else can they do to kind of feel like, okay, wasn't just a nice little year, we want to build on this? Is there probably some kind of postseason berth in their future? Like, what's left for them to kind of accomplish in a season where they've already kind of at least checked the box of quite a bit of improvement?
Yeah, I do think that however you slice it, I mean, if you end the season right now, it would be a pretty big accomplishment to go from last place in the Big Ten 2 years in a row, to 18-win season. And they can't finish lower than 10th in the Big Ten, even if they lose on Saturday. And that would be their best finish since 2019. So, I think that he's come a long way this year. Everyone that watches the Gophers, except for that last night, I think, and probably the Nebraska game, they look at this team and they see a team that's talented enough probably to make the NCAA tournament, or, be a NCAA tournament caliber team. We talked to Ben Johnson the other day, and he said that he thinks this team could even win a tournament game. So they passed the eye test. The numbers show that they have major improvement from last year. You talk about a finish. I mean, how about just surprise us a little bit more, win a game or two that we don't think you can win. I'm not talking about Indiana at home. I mean, if you're a tournament, if you say you're a team that if you're in the tournament you could win, or you belong there, then you should win versus Indiana at home, whether it's a bad matchup or not. So we'll just throw that game out the window. But in the Big Ten tournament, they potentially could have a high enough seed where they're not going to be playing, the lower half of the Big Ten unless there's some upsets early. They'll be playing some pretty good teams. And the only way I see them making the tournament now is if they win the Big Ten tournament, in my opinion. Because by the time you get to the championship game, if you talk about them having let's say they have a bye in the first round, so they would have to win, 3 games?
Yeah.
That's not enough quality wins to get there. I mean, like I said, there's teams with 5 quad 1 wins that might not make it. And their non-conference schedule is so poor that even if they were to win 2 games to get to the championship game, they would hold that non-conference strength of schedule and strength of schedule overall against them. And they also picked up another quad 3 loss versus Indiana. So now they have 2 quad 3 losses at home to Missouri and Indiana, and it's just too much to overcome. So NCAA tournament, have to win the Big Ten tournament. That's probably not going to happen. So anything less than that, like I said, you'd like to see a couple nice wins. Northwestern on the road would be one. If you play, I'm not sure who they face. Ohio State, Michigan State, maybe Indiana again, Northwestern, all these teams, they're capable of beating. They've beaten before, and they can prove themselves, redeem themselves with the Indiana loss. Nebraska, all these teams that are above them in the standings or right near them. If you get a couple of those wins, I like that momentum going into the offseason. And then you'll put yourselves in the NIT where anything can happen. We've seen a team that I think this team's probably more talented than the team that won the NIT championship. And, they went on a run, and I think that was a way for them to prove that, hey, if we were in the tournament, or we probably belong in the tournament. So, and the thing about this team is they're not going to play at home again. The NIT can't host the NIT with a Big Ten tournament at the Target Center that moves the high school state tournament to Williams Arena. So they'll be playing on the road. But they've played pretty competitively on the road, won some road games this year. You want to get as high a seed as possible in the NIT, and I think that's what they're playing for. I think you're playing to try to make some noise in the Big Ten tournament in front of the home crowd, take away that taste in the fans' mouth of the Indiana game. You want to get the Gopher fans excited again, and what better way to do that in Minneapolis on a big stage like that, and then again get a high seed in the NIT and try to make a run at it for the championship.
And of course, they've won the NIT, like you said. They've never won the Big Ten tournament. Although I remember there was a year under Tubby where they at least made it to the Big Ten title game, right? And they needed that to get into the NCAA tournament, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember what.
That was good enough to get them in the tournament, making that run to the championship game. But again, we're talking about a different resume. We're talking about a team that beat Louisville that year. I believe that was the year they beat Louisville. And Louisville ended up having the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
So, they tested themselves as a non-conference and they got the win they needed. They also beat Indiana that year. I think, actually, no, that was the Trevor Mbakwe year, but they also had some pretty good wins in conference as well, ranked teams. And so, again, I'm not saying that it's 100% impossible that they don't make it if they make the championship game. I just think with that strength of schedule so low and the fact that all of their wins are in the Big Ten and a down year in the Big Ten, I just don't think it's enough for the NCAA tournament. But making a championship game, come on, in your backyard, and let's say Purdue gets upset, you never know. Well, you don't want to face Purdue. Nobody wants to face
Nobody
Purdue.
does. Yeah.
Semifinals, championship, that's a done deal. But I do think that they just have to avoid first round exit. I'm sorry, first round, opening round exit. So like the first game they have in the Big Ten tournament, they have to win that.
Yep.
They do. I mean, has nothing to do with the NCAA tournament or anything like that. It's just to leave a good taste in the mouth of the fans, to take some momentum into the NIT. It would be really nice to stack up a couple wins here in a row at Northwestern and then their first game in the Big Ten tournament.
So maybe we can end with this. Like, what are some of the off-season priorities? Then you wrote about Cam Christie the other day and how, there's already talk. He's got, the NBA ready body, just like his brother. And he went to the league.
Well, I don't know about, let's scale that back a little bit.
Yes.
And this is no knock on Cam. He'd probably agree with me. He doesn't have an NBA body.
Okay.
He does have a similar frame to his brother.
Okay.
Needed to add a little bit of weight.
Okay.
But he has NBA size as far as his height, his length, and then shooting ability. I mean, you can stick him in an NBA game right now and he's going to hit a couple threes. Okay. And he's improved his defense as well, starting to go to the basket, showing off improved athleticism. I mean, he's got all you want. Just to add a little bit more weight, but he's got all you want in an NBA prototypical shooting guard. He's worked on his ability to play a little bit at the one. So, I really think that he's one of the better guard prospects that we've seen the Gophers have since Amir Coffey. He's probably the best one since Amir Coffey as far as an NBA prospect at the guard position. And, the scouts are looking at him quite a bit. I think the pedigree of his brother helps. His brother's proven to be, I think he can be a good role player in the league. So, and they're very similar. As far as the roster is concerned, I mean, this entire team could come back next year, including Parker Fox for a seventh year, with the exception of Jack Wilson's a grad transfer. And then, they've got a couple walk-ons. But I think that this team, it's going to be interesting because they have a lot of decisions. Dawson Garcia, he flirted with the NBA a couple of years ago. He went through the draft process. He was even in like the during the combine and all that. So, 2 years later, he's definitely a better player. Didn't show it against Indiana for a lot of NBA scouts, but they know what he's about, and he's had a really, really good year.
Yeah.
Bro Payne, man, another year of development, and if he's healthy next year, he can make the biggest jump out of anybody. So yeah, I mean, and Elijah Hawkins too. I mean, that core right there, Mike Mitchell Jr., Mark Coyle, the Gophers athletic director, he said last week that if they can return their core for next year, he thinks it's a top 25 preseason team. And I'm not going to argue with him as far as talent. I think they have to finish stronger, Big Ten tournament NIT to prove that they are. But talent wise, they're definitely have the talent of a preseason top 25 team.
Well, and we're definitely asking different questions right now than we were a year ago. I mean, that's pretty obvious. We're asking like, how good can this team be? Not, hey, is Ben Johnson going to be able to keep his job after 3 years? Like that much we've identified. Like he's got a good thing going. It's just kind of a question of how many of these players come back, and what do some of these new pieces, whatever it is, the guys coming in, whatever they can add in the portal, whoever stays, where does that get them next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dinkytown athletes, their collective is it's all about that. I mean, we've done a pretty good job with our kind of pointing out kind of the guys that are involved with that. Robert Gagg and Derek Burns, Star Tribune's doing a good story on that. Randy Johnson, and I think that they're putting all of the emphasis in their NIL collective. And I think that's the key. It was the key to bringing some key football players back, and Darius Taylor and some others. And I think, they're going to try as hard as they can to do the same for basketball.
It's a whole new era, but we'll roll with it, and Marcus will have you covered no matter what. Follow his coverage from the Northwestern game. Follow his coverage from the Big Ten tournament next week at Target Center. Marcus, appreciate it as always. We'll talk soon.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Always good to talk to Marcus Fuller. A good dose of reality, too, right? Like a lot of us maybe have a skewed picture of where the Gophers are, thinking, maybe they can get an at-large berth right now, too. He's looking at it. He's saying, I've seen how this plays out over the years. I've seen where their net rating is. I've seen what their quality wins are. They probably need to win the Big Ten tournament to get into the NCAA tournament at this point, with some of the missed opportunities they've had down the stretch to get quality wins. Even if they beat Northwestern on Saturday, it'll be a tall task for them. That said, we shouldn't define this season by did you or did you not make the NCAA tournament. This has already been a vast improvement for them, a chance to take another step next year, which will be important. Going one step further, being in legitimate or more serious contention for an NCAA tournament berth, being a team that like Marcus said, could be a top 25 contender at the beginning of the year. Things like that. Where can they start? Where will they finish next year, and how much can Ben Johnson keep building this thing is a more important question than what's happening exactly right now in the here and now. Let's finish with the cooler couple of hockey things. First off, the Wild gets a big win in Arizona, keeping their flickering playoff hopes alive. Marc-Andre Fleury, who, if we're being honest, has probably played better than Philip Gustafson, at least of late. Their season stats are pretty comparable. He had another good game, shook off a couple quick goals by Arizona. Wild get that win. They seal it late on a day when one of the Deweys, Brandon Duhaime, gets traded to Colorado. The Wild get a third-round pick in 2026 back in return. The other Dewey, Connor Dewar, gets a goal for the Wild in this one. It's I don't know where they're at right now in the season is a little bit hit or miss. We can't really make too much of one game right now, but they got to keep stacking up wins to have any chance. Kind of showing their hand right now where they are in trading a player who can help them the rest of the way in Brandon Duhaime, but being realistic about where they are and maybe more moves. I don't know. We'll see if more is to come. Yet today, trade deadline for the NHL at 2 p.m. today Central Time. We'll see if they have any more moves to make, but making a case that, hey, even if the season hasn't gone according to plan, don't trade everybody. Give themselves a chance in these last handful of games down the stretch as we get into March, deeper into March and April. Maybe they can go on a little run, make this a real threat to get into the playoffs again. So we'll see where that all winds up. And like I said at the beginning, boys hockey state tournament. Even before the Twins broke their 18-game postseason losing streak last year in the playoffs, beating Toronto, going on to win that series. The most amazing streak in local sports, at least losing streaks, might have been and continues to be White Bear Lake. You feel bad for the Bears. 0-20 now. They've lost 20 straight first-round games at the boys hockey state tournament, their last 20. And this one on Thursday had a particular twinge of heartbreak playing against Grand Rapids. White Bear Lake was down 1-0 for most of the game, tied it late, and then lost it even later. Grand Rapids scored with 1.6 seconds left. On the broadcast, it looked like 0.2 seconds left. They added a little bit of time, so officially 1.6 seconds left. Just one more line rush at the end of that game. Otherwise, it would have gone into overtime. White Bear Lake would have had a chance to break that streak in overtime. Instead, that streak continues. I can remember covering games 20 years ago when they were trying to break the streak, and it was still a huge streak back then. They'd get to the section playoffs. They'd try to get past Hill Murray, get to the state tournament. Sometimes they'd be in different sections, things like that. They still couldn't get over the hump. There was heartbreak back then, too. Here we go again for White Bear Lake, but you know what? There's always next year. This will get broken at some point. Look at the Twins. They finally did break it. It's not forever. It just feels like it when it's been since 1945, almost 80 years since they last won a first-round game at the boys hockey tournament. Maybe next year, the mantra of White Bear Lake and, of course, Minnesota sports in general. That will do it for me today. So much to get to today. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Should be great stuff coming up next week as well. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great weekend. Back at it again on Monday.